I'm Susan. Have you ever wanted one of these beautiful beaded boards? They're really, really nice to have and they're great to work on. Well, the only problem I find with them is they're very pricey. And I have figured out a way that you can create your own beading board just by using some scraps and things you have around the house. The only thing you need is a bead mat for the top of it, and after that, you're pretty much ready to go. So let me show you how inexpensive and simple these are to create. I'm starting out with a 6" by 6" board. This is just some cardboard that I've found in the recycling bin. Now, depending on how thick your cardboard is how many pieces you'll need. For previous ones that I've made, I've used 4 pieces. For this one, they're a little thicker, so I'm only going to need 3 pieces. I put a piece of cardboard, just a scrap piece, underneath so I don't scratch my table. And I've already pre-measured this out, so I'm just using a utility knife, and I score it once. And the nice thing about corrugated cardboard is once you've scored it, it's just layers put together, so it's real easy to lift it up and just cut it. And it's much easier to cut this multiple times than once. So here I've already scored this side. Easy cuts, and you can get it to break. Once you get it to break, you're basically just cutting another thin layer of cardboard on the bottom. And that's all there is to it. And that will create a thicker sandwich. It's almost 1 inch thick, which is just perfect. Here's one I've previously made. So when you lay this on the table, it's a nice, comfortable area. And this is just padding for your arms. That's all this really is for your hands, and to keep the beads from rolling over. So this is your base that we're creating, and then we're just wrapping it. To put our sandwich of cardboard together, I'm just going to hot glue this. And it doesn't have to be seriously hot glued with lots and lots of glue. You're going to have a piece of fabric around this that holds it together. You just don't want this to wiggle with the fabric. Just make life easier. I'm using a piece of veloux blanket. Now you can get these at Walmart or anywhere online. They're basically the same thing as a giant beading mat. And the nice thing about them is you can put them on your table and make a large area for your beading area. You're not stuck in that small area. If you don't have a veloux blanket, you can use just a straight up beading mat. So I'm basically just cutting a square that I can cover this. Now that I have my fabric, there's 2 ways you can cover this. You can use a hot glue gun or a staple gun. I found the only difference with the hot glue and the staple gun was you had to wait a few seconds for the hot glue to dry. So up to you, whichever one is easier is the one you should use. Before I staple it though, I'm going to cut some of this bulk out of the corners. And you don't have to be perfect about this, because if you do see this corner come out, remember we're covering this with a bumper, so you won't see it anyway. You're really mostly concerned about covering the top of it. This fabric is thick, so it does get very bulky. I'm just going to staple this because it was the quickest. I don't think on camera you want to watch the glue dry. It's very easy to hot glue this. You just put a line of glue here and then hold it for a minute. I'm just going to staple it on each side, and I like to work opposite sides, just pulling it tight. And for the corners, I've cut them out so you can see they're open, but don't worry, remember we're putting a bumper on this, so you won't even see that. Just worry that it's nice and tight. Perfect. And now you can see we have our nice board. This little crease will work away. It was just where it was folded in the package. For the core of our bumper, I'm just using an old t-shirt from my husband. It has a few stains in it, a few holes in it, so I don't feel guilty sacrificing it. And what I'm going to do is fold it up just so that you can see it better as I cut it, because it doesn't need to be neat or perfect. It just needs to be cut, and I cut it from about here down. This is the armpit hole over here, this is the top, this is the bottom, and I'm just going to cut it across. Now this is probably way too much fabric for what I need. Here's the seam. I prefer to cut down that. It gives you a perfect guideline. Now, opening it up. Oh, I can see all the holes on this side, but I'm going to take this and I'm going to roll it up. I'm going to take the thicker edge and just roll that in. Now, I can't possibly roll the whole piece at once because I'm just not capable with two hands. But just roll it as tight as you can, and don't worry that it's not perfect and that you can't roll the whole thing. Just roll it as far as you can. And we need something to keep this in place. And I'm just literally using Scotch tape. So I'm rolling and taping. And this happens to work really, really well. I am surprised how easy this stayed together, and it didn't have a bulky feeling or anything underneath the fabric. So as you go, you're going to have all this other fabric. Just work it, folding it over itself and twisting it into the core. Don't worry about it being perfect. And if your tape isn't sticking, you can tape it all the way around. You can try masking tape, might work too. I'm sure it probably would. Whatever you have, just use whatever you have. That's my whole theory with this. And I'm just going to continue wrapping this. And I'll stay on camera because this is the part you're going to struggle the most. Just wrap it the best you can and keep it as tight as you can. Now wrap the whole thing even though you're not going to use it, because you really don't know where you're going to stop. And it's better to just have it all wrapped up and have enough than to have to try to go back and wrap it. So I'm just unraveling it a little bit because I'm trying to find the middle and wrapping it back onto itself. And it's okay if it gets some folds in there. I didn't notice it at all in the end when I had it bulky or folded. And there you have your bumper. Here I have the bottom of a long swing top. Decided I'm going to sacrifice it because it's got a few holes in it and it's not looking too good. Now I'm going to cut this edge off at the very bottom, but it's easier to cut the bottom first. So this is about how much I need, about 6 inches. And it's just easier to fold it up onto itself when you're cutting like that. Now this is too bulky, this folded edge, so I'm just going to cut that off. And I'm going to cut it once again at the seam like I did the other one. Always easier to cut where the seams are. Now what I like the most about jersey is it's stretchable, so it makes this really easy to work with. And here I'll just cut the rest of this off. Before you glue your fabric, you want to take this edge and tack it down. Now to add our bumper, this is going to seem a little backwards, but we're going to take the fabric and put the pretty side down. Now you want to glue your edge down. And you want to have it with the long side going towards the good side. So here's your board. You want the good side down. Now, sometimes I like to take a pencil and rub over my hot glue. Just better than using your fingers and burning them. But make sure you get all of these edges, because otherwise your little tiny seed beads will seep into there. Now whatever you do, don't use the stretch in the fabric. We need that for later. So just use it how it naturally is. Just let it lay down there. And here's where we started. I want to cut about an inch past that. Being careful not to cut my other fabric. Oh, and I was lucky I didn't have a seam in this one. Just missed the seam. And now I'll glue over this edge and glue my last piece down on top of it. So we have this strange looking board in the middle with a drape around it. So put the drape all in the middle. And now we're going to take our core. And our core, you can see the end is kind of frayed down the way it rolled. Easiest thing to do, just cut that so you have a nice butt edge. Now it's a little harder to cut than it looks, but just be patient, you can get it. Now to build our bumper, we want to have our core go a little higher up towards the front of our beading tray. We want to make this a tray by having this a little higher so the beads don't just roll off. So don't put it down like this, which is a natural thing to do. Push it, make sure you glue it up higher. And I like to start the glue more towards the middle when I'm starting on my roll here, because it's just easier to match it up in the middle. So follow the glue line you have from the fabric and just glue it down. Now this takes a little bit more patience because you're going to have to hold it in place while it dries. Now the one thing I did forget to mention is my favorite hot glue is Gorilla Glue. If you've ever used that one, it does not come undone no matter what happens. It is not like any other hot glue I've used. Now when you get to the end here, you've got to trim this. I try to go maybe 1/8 of an inch a little bit further down. And once again, the challenge of cutting this. Now I'm just going to glue inside that roll and down so that this meets in nice and snug. The reason I cut a little extra fabric here is I want this to not lose its bulk. So when you pull the fabric over, you can't tell where you had the seam there. Now the hardest part is to let this really set and dry for a few minutes. Now that we've sat and dried and I've got all my sides on and you can see the back, I'm going to take my fabric and pull it over, and this will all make sense to you now how I've done this. So you can see that ugly shirt just gets completely covered up with a pretty blouse or shirt. Now you have two options here. You can hot glue this on the bottom, or you can just staple it. I prefer to staple it just because it's quicker than watching the hot glue dry. And just pull it back onto itself. The corner, since this is the corner that we had the fabric start on, I just want to tuck that under and staple it. Sometimes this is where hot glue is easier because the staples don't like to go through a lot of fabric. But then I will take this edge and go all the way down. And then I'm just going to pull the following edge all the way back. Now, if I glue this, you won't see anything, so I'm going to staple it and glue it. Make sure you push that staple down real good, because if it just catches the fabric, it won't work. And now, just to keep it in place, I'm just going to glue this edge under. And to save my fingers, I'm just going to use my trusty little pencil to shove that edge under. Never sacrifice yourself to hot glue. It's not worth it. And you can see you have a beautiful back on that one. And once you push it and turn it over, you have your beading tray. Just push up your shirt a little bit, because when we pulled this, we kind of moved it around. I maybe could tighten that up on that edge. Yeah, there we go. But you can see you have a perfect, beautiful beading tray. And that didn't cost very much, and it didn't take us very long. Well, these are the other ones that I finished, and I wanted to share with you some of the little tricks and some of my mistakes. This one was, of course, another t-shirt, but I didn't cut it long enough. So what I did, I had a big spot here that was empty. Now, I would have put a piece of felt there, but I didn't have a piece of felt that matched, so I just decided to take a piece of the other shirt that I had left up by the top of the shoulder, and I cut out a square and just folded under the edges and glued them down, and then glued it on so that it looked nice on the bottom as it does on the top. This one I created using this foam instead of a t-shirt. This is that foam that you get in packaging sometimes. I just rolled this up for the edges and it worked fine. And then I was thinking about it, you could probably even use paper towels as your core. So if you don't have an extra t-shirt, you could probably just roll up some paper towels and make a core out of that and tape it and put it underneath. Now this one, I doubled up the t-shirt because I did this one after I did this one. And this one I had a black t-shirt as the core, and because I didn't double it up, you can see where I folded it over here, and you can see the seam a little bit more here. It doesn't look terrible. I could still use it. I mean, it's just a work thing, but I always want my things in my studio to look pretty just because I use them so much. But the other thing I did was, where I didn't have enough fabric, I just put a piece of felt on the bottom, and that seemed to do the trick just fine. So if you don't have enough fabric and you want to finish another one, you can use any scrap of fabric you have just to finish off the bottom so it doesn't catch, and you don't have to worry if you use staples or anything that they will come out. The glue will hold them down in for you. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope I gave you lots of ideas, and I hope you have lots of fun making beadboards for you and your friends. Thanks for watching.